Okay then, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue in this room here. And now we move on to something as well, which is quite close to my heart, and that is the sort of global trends of AI and integrity as well. And so, to keep us on track, I won't waste any more time, and I will introduce you to James Thorley, the Regional Vice President of APAC for Turnitin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so I'm the Regional Vice President for Turnitin. I've been involved at Turnitin and with academic integrity for over 15 years now, firstly in the UK and the last 7 years in Asia Pacific. And I'm very happy today to take you through a bit of a journey through the past and the last couple of years, and then finally looking towards the future, particularly around AI and AI writing tools, around integrity, both in undergraduate as well as in research. So we're in mid-afternoon now, so I thought for a bit of engagement, I thought I'd start with a quiz question that you can play along with. Feel free to shout out, but you can play in your head as well. So the question is, when was the first time plagiarism was used in the context of literature? We have three options. Is it answer A, when the poet Fidentinus took the poems of Martial and recite them as his own? Was it B, when the writer and critic Robert Greene accused the budding playwright William Shakespeare of plagiarism? Or was it answer C, when Leonardo da Vinci plagiarized the Vitruvian Man? Have you all decided on your answer? Anyone want to shout out? No? Well, A? Who said A? Yeah. A is correct, back in 80 AD. Now, obviously that's a bit of fun, but the point I'm trying to make there really is that since there's been the written word, there has been the concept of plagiarism. However, for the vast majority, or for the first 1600 or so years of AD, really it was perceived less of an issue, and it wasn't really until the Enlightenment came about and the idea of intellectual property became more prevalent. And that certainly was in the West first, it developed at different times in different cultures. It was only then that plagiarism began to be seen as more of an issue. And of course, for the vast extent of human existence, it was quite challenging to commit plagiarism in terms of you'd have to write things out by hand. You could only refer to one text at once. And it was only with the advent of the computer era, first with copy and paste, and then, of course, the huge advancement with the internet and the ability to really have all of human knowledge available online and as much published, access to as much published work or online content as you could handle, that with copy and paste as well, that we started to see it being raised as a concern amongst universities. I was working in the UK in the early 2000s, and there was a huge amount of effort put in there with the undergraduate side. And that's when Turnitin was formed as well. We're nearly 25 years old now. It's a similar story, I think, on the research side. So as everyone here will be fully aware, since the turn of the century, there's been a huge increase in the amount of research published. And there's been a corresponding increase, or more than corresponding, the rate of retractions has gone up since then. So this is a chart from Retraction Watch, charting the first 20 years of this century. And alongside that, of course, there's been a huge rise in interest and concern around research integrity amongst universities as well. And this is taken from a study we did in Japan earlier this year. We have copies of this at the front if you're interested. And 85% of respondents feel very concerned or concerned about the negative impact of research misconduct on the reputation and prestige of their university. Of course, we're here with Times Higher Education, and reputation is linked to rankings, is linked to funding, is linked to future success of universities. So over the last 20 years, I think there's been a lot of focus, particularly here in Japan and East Asia, on the importance of research integrity. Now, back to more the undergraduate side, or it can affect postgraduates as well, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about contract cheating. Now, I know the UK people in the room will be fully aware of what contract cheating is. I'm kind of curious how many people in Japan have heard the term before. Can you raise your hand if you heard of contract cheating as a concept? Very few, okay. So contract cheating is essentially where a student is outsourcing their work, their assignment to a third party, and there's some kind of payment in kind, usually cash, to deliver that work. It can be done not just with SA Mills Online. Conceptually, it could be done with a family member, etc. But the big concern, the big issue, certainly in Australia and UK and elsewhere in the English-speaking world, is really with the online websites. It's a huge industry, the contract cheating industry, many hundreds of millions of dollars. And there's been a lot of research done, particularly in Australia, over the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, around the reasons and the prevalence. Research done a few years ago in Australia suggested that maybe 6% of students engage or admit to engaging in at least one contract cheating behavior. So you may say, oh, that's great, 94% aren't, but obviously 6% is a huge number of students. Now, universities and governments are taking action on this. So, institutions are working with us. We have technology around contract to assist detecting contract cheating now among students. And there's an awful lot of education that's going on as well. I'm not going to spend too long talking about contract cheating, but it is a fascinating subject, and there's a lot of risks for students with the concept of contract cheating. Governments have also started to take action. The UK government and the Australian government have both made it illegal for the online contract cheating sites. However, that only really works if there's a local jurisdiction, if they're based in country, and this is a completely global industry. So unfortunately, that is not going to solve the issue on its own. So over the next couple of slides, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the shifts that have happened over the past, 3 years now, isn't it? Nearly 3 years. Now, as we heard this morning from you, Peter, I think the universities did a fantastic job really overall in the shift to online in a short period of time. Hugely challenging environment. I think that a lot of universities did take steps to change assessment, to not set exams. But there has been a lot of concern around the shifting of assessment to online, certainly in the media, around the potential increase in cheating that's happened with that move. Now, because it's quite early on, of course, there isn't a lot of research out there. I don't think there's any research out there as to what the actual impact was. But I think it's fair to say that there are a few criteria. There's a few. The shift certainly would lead to think that there'd be a potential increase in cheating for a number of reasons. Firstly, as we said, it was a big shift. It was a dramatic shift. Universities, I think, did a great job, but there was still a lot of confusion, and students either deliberately or accidentally, as they came towards the end of the assignment, may have been more likely to engage in cheating behaviors. I think the added stress of the pandemic certainly didn't help with this. Clearly, the move to online, away from in-person invigilation, does create more opportunities. There were online tools that were put into place to help mitigate that, but I think if you're going to do online, there's always going to be more risk than in person when it comes to some aspects of cheating behaviors. And just the increased use of online tools in general, the access the students would have, definitely could potentially lead to an increase of collusion and file sharing, etc. Now, when it comes to the research side, I think one of the major changes that we saw with research over the past 3 years has really been the rapid growth of preprints. So this chart is showing biomedical, I think, preprints. And as you can see, I think it starts in 2013. They were already distinctly on the rise, but they really did explode in 2020, sort of doubled overnight. A lot of this obviously linked to COVID research. And I think there are obviously a lot of positive aspects to preprints, and it's also fair to say that traditional peer review published journal work isn't also free of issues. But I think we did see that there was a lot of misleading science, misleading research published through preprints, particularly around COVID, which could then be utilized by people who may be less on the wrong side of the debate, as it were. And I think what's going to be interesting, based on everything that I've discussed with experts around research integrity, is that preprints are definitely here to stay, or the increase in preprints is definitely here to stay. And how does the research community react to that? And what is the role of the preprint going forward? And how do we ensure that we're still raising standards in research overall? Okay, so for the next few slides, I want to talk a little bit about what's going to be coming down the track, and this is particularly around AI and AI writing. So there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years about AI writing tools. So essentially what this is, it's algorithms that are based on large language models and this huge cohort of text taken from various aspects of the internet, which then are able to learn how to write in English in a grammatically accurate and coherent way. And then they're then turned into these, like I say, these large language models. And then tools can be built on top of that to enable people to do different things. On the one hand, there's what we call here AI text generators. So that's where they're given a prompt, a question maybe, and they're able to output a coherent, grammatically correct, but not necessarily factually correct, fairly long form response, up to a few hundred words now. And then there's also AI rewriters, and they're kind of the next stage of what used to be called text spinners or synonym replacements, where you take a already written text and then it can paraphrase it, again, grammatically accurately, retaining the same meaning, but essentially it's completely new text. We're seeing a lot of focus at the moment in Australia. I'm having a lot of conversations with universities in Australia. There's a lot of focus in the US on this, of course, and the UK, or the English-speaking world. The most common model is known as OpenAI, and then there's various tools that have been built on that. GPT-3 was the most well-known one, which was actually released over 2 years ago now, as you can see, in the headline, the date on that headline. And then just a couple of weeks ago, ChatGPT was released, and immediately again generated a huge host of headlines across, all of the media, and a lot of. I've been asked something today about it by media. There's an awful lot of interest in this. So I don't know if anyone has taken a look at ChatGPT. It is an impressive tool, and I do recommend. It's free to use. You can just sign up and play around with it. And I did use it a couple of weeks ago as I was preparing for this presentation, and I thought it might be fun to see what it could do. So one of the slides I have presented so far in this presentation was written by ChatGPT. I'm not going to ask you to guess which one it is, because I think that's probably too hard, but there was one slide, the slide that I presented here, which didn't have any references. And I think there's an interesting debate looking to the future is how do you reference AI-generated text? But yes, these bullet points here were essentially written by ChatGPT. That is the screenshot of the prompt at the top there. So I asked the question, why did academic misconduct increase during the pandemic? And it immediately spat out the answer with all of those bullets. And I was pretty impressed. I was particularly impressed around the quantifying at the start there, around the fact there hasn't been much research done so far. One thing I would say with these tools at the moment is that this is a screenshot from my phone. I did later then try and do it on a laptop, and it obviously gave a different answer. I thought the answer wasn't as good, it wasn't as developed. It didn't put that quantifier at the start around the lack of research. And I think and I've also seen a lot of examples where it's been factually incorrect. So it's one thing being able to write fluently, it's another thing being able to write fluently and accurately on a topic. And I think this is going to be, there's been a lot of debate about what that means for the public sphere more generally around these tools. But I think it's a very important thing right now for academics to realize that it's not always going to be, it's not going to be writing, high quality answers all the time, and they're relatively short as well. So, but why are these, that being said, I think it's definitely the case that these tools are going to be incredibly disruptive. I think they are already changing a number of industries as we speak, particularly, say, marketing, where you have copywriting. Why would you not use a tool like an AI writing tool to help you write marketing copy, and then maybe tweak it or edit it with a human? But for us in the academic sphere, I think the huge debate that's happening right now, of course, is what does this mean for the essay? And there's a few aspects to this. Firstly, how can we ensure the integrity of the essay if a student could go and not write any of it and it's written by a machine? I think to a certain extent right now that's exactly the same issue we have with contract cheating, but of course the difference is the cost, and the prevalence could be much greater in the future. And I think there's a more philosophical debate around why shouldn't students use an AI tool to help augment their writing. And I think one of the discussions, I've been in a number of meetings, sat through a number of discussions with a lot of back and forth on how this might work in future, whether it should be, where's the ethics of it, where's the academic integrity in this piece. But I think it's going to be a real question, as if we are wanting to graduate students who are ready for the real world, and they're going to be using these kinds of tools in the workplace, then shouldn't we be preparing them in universities for that? And then also, what does it mean for the essay as a tool for assessment? Both obviously on the integrity piece, but if people are not going to be writing long form text in future, is it relevant to assess them on that? Is that a good test of learning or test for learning? I think these are a lot of big questions that the academic world is going to have to grapple with, and it is already grappling with over the coming years. So for the last couple of slides, really, I just want to quickly talk about what we're doing at Turnitin about this. So on the left-hand side here, we have the available services, as we call it, the tools that people could use to conduct misconduct, which is copy-paste, which we've already been dealing with for many years now, like I say, 20 years, and with the world leaders on. Similarly, word spinners, synonym replacement, that's something that's been possible to detect for some time. And then we get onto the more modern, the AI side of things. This is a little bit of an old slide. We do now have the ability to detect paraphrase work from a technical standpoint. We haven't yet released it, and we're working with universities and key experts at the moment to figure out how we might display that, because we don't want to confuse people. And then when it comes to completely new AI text generation, that's something that we're looking at. Right now, AI, there are still telltale signs for AI written text that's different from human written text. But I think as it continues to evolve, and apparently GPT-4 will be released potentially next year, it's going to be harder and harder to tell the difference between AI written text and human written text. So I think what's more interesting actually for the future is more on the right-hand side here, the medium term and long term. And there's obviously a lot of concern. There's a lot of people worried about the impact of AI writing. But there's an awful lot of positive that could come out of it as well. And how can we think about using some of these tools and this technology in a much more pedagogical way? You can imagine that as well as being able to write text like this, you'll also be able to analyze student work and be able to give incredibly detailed feedback to students, to teachers, to universities around the progress of a student as they go across a course or go across their university life in a way that hasn't been possible before due to scale and due to the ability to go into that much detail. And then, as well, as I said, how do we actually think about changing assessment to combine the best practice of traditional assessment with some of these new technologies that are coming in? And I think we can think about using these tools in this way as well. So how do you, maybe you ask the student to see what the tool can do, you compare it with what they've done, you do a rewrite, you incorporate it in various different ways. So I think while there is clearly a lot to be concerned about, I actually think this does open a whole lot of new opportunities as well that are going to be very interesting and actually very positive. Briefly, just want to mention the fact that obviously AI is more than just AI writing. There's various other uses of AI that can be quite transformative. One of the big things with AI is to take what's a menial task for people and allow them to focus on what's most important. And with our tool Gradescope on the left here, what we do is we use AI to group the same answer together across a large group of students, could be 100, 200, 300, and then as a teacher you can mark it once and it spreads the mark across all of those. And as you can imagine, you can save up to 80 to 90% in that way. On the right here, with the tool ExamSoft, it's about using AI to assist in ID verification. And I think the key thing here from a company perspective is we talk about AI-assisted assessments. So we have a view of a human-centered AI. We don't see AI as being out there replacing people's jobs. It's not going to replace the impact or the importance of the human within the education process. It's about taking the load off on the more menial tasks. It's about providing insight where normally none will be able to be gained, and supporting the teacher, supporting the university and the student through that process. So just to finish, our goal at Turnitin is to help educators grow and improve the greatness of every learner anywhere and anytime. And I think there's two key parts to that when it comes to integrity and assessment. The first is always trying to ensure the integrity of assessment. That is still the number one thing that universities talk to me about, is concerns around ensuring the integrity of assessment. And the second piece, I think, is looking at assessment overall and how can we make sure that it remains relevant, that it remains authentic, true to learning, that is assessment for learning, and that we are graduating students who ultimately are going to be better equipped for modern life, and that's better for the student, it's better for the university, and it's better for society overall. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. If we have time for questions, then happy to take some.
So thank you very much. First of all, yesterday I asked ChatGPT if it was a responsible AI, and it gave a perfect answer to why it was not a responsible AI in the way it was using the data and so forth. My question actually, you spoke a lot about education. Mm-hmm. I'm here representing Elsevier, we have other colleagues here. How do you think of these tools for researchers with the creative ideas as a start, with the research, then actually going to support writing papers, given that papers in the current form have a certain form in that sense. How do you see upon that?
Yeah, I think I think one of the things that technology can do is, to a certain extent, can maybe help democratize some of this, in the fact that the research world is English language, and yet there's the vast majority of researchers in the world don't write English as their first language. So I think and here's where I think maybe the difference with research is, to a certain extent, than undergraduate work is, usually in undergraduate work, the writing is part of the assessment, whereas it's the idea much more in research, right? It's much less about how you've written it, and it's much more about, is the idea original and what is the impact of the idea. So I think the interesting for research will be, yes, can the tools be used to really, I mean, to a certain extent, it's an extension of the spell checker, right? No one argues about using a spell checker now. No one argues about using grammar correcting tools. The difficulty will be, of course, is where's that line where it becomes no longer the idea of the researcher, and it's the machine. And I think that's an incredibly difficult area, and I don't think we're anywhere close to deciding where that is yet. But I think it is a slightly different debate in research than in undergraduate, I'd say, yeah.
Well, along with that line, I think the AI is soon become just a tool, right? And then it's not different from word processor. And word processor we use nowadays for granted, and we rely on to check and write grammatically correct sentences and so forth. And AI may become the same as the tool. And if it becomes a tool, the student have to learn to use it wisely. And if that is the case, we cannot just say your AI written sentences are bad, essays are bad. How are we going to proceed from here to that stage where the student can actually, learners can, not only researchers, but students can use AI as a tool, and still, they have to learn something, not just rely on AI to do all the work, but they have to use AI as a tool. How do you picture the transition?
Well, yes, it's going to be difficult to say. I think the conversations we're having, and I'm based in Australia, so I talk mostly to Australian universities. There's a lot of discussion at the moment about exactly how it can be incorporated into a classroom environment. But, and again, I have to be careful about, I talk to a lot of people who are very interested and focused on this, and so they're keen to see how things can move forwards. Of course, there's probably an awful lot of people who work in universities who have maybe a different view, and I think there's going to be a bit of tension for a while in terms of how those two viewpoints are balanced. But my personal belief is that over time, of course, students are going to be using it, and you can't hide away from the fact. So it's much better to support the students and help guide them as opposed to try and ignore the fact. And like I say, I think it's going to be very, I used ChatGPT as a deliberately as part of this presentation, but it's going to be widely used in work going forwards. So it seems very strange to sort of not do that in an education environment. It's not, that's not being fair to the students. But I think exactly how it happens, that is a huge debate that's happening now, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it develops over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Sorry, basically same question.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of sounds silly, but I have to confess that I'm completely addicted you to use Grammarly. I'm not selling a product, but I rely on all the time. Even writing simple email, I need to use that. So my question is, when do you have to be careful? Or I rely on this system, but how much we can go, we can rely on those? That's probably same question. Sorry.
Yeah, well, exactly. I don't think we know yet, right? I think it's the thing as well. I would say is I don't think there's going to be a sudden big jump, right? It's all gradual. You get the tools in email now where it predicts what word you're going to say next, and you can choose it, right? So I use that sometimes. So it's going to be a gradual process, and the challenge I think certainly for education universities is that they have to react, because current academic integrity policies, and I've had discussions as well on this, current academic integrity policies don't mention AI writing tools. So universities need to go back and look at the policies, because otherwise they're going to get into trouble when all of a sudden it's everywhere and they haven't thought about it. So the most important thing I think for universities to do now is to think about how they're going to handle it, because it's already here, and it's in some ways, I guess it's good that it's got a lot of, certainly in English language press, it's got a lot of attention at the moment, because it's forcing people to act on that. Obviously, we're talking English and with English writing here. I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing that it's going to take a lot longer for Japanese AI writing tools to be developed. But I've seen the development of Google Translate over the last 10 years in Asian languages, and it's pretty good now, right? So the Asian languages, I'm sure, are only going to be a certain number of years behind before AI writing is also, across every language in the world.